So in October, Council might remember you received a couple of delegations requesting funding. One was the St. Michael's and All Angels Anglican Church. They had requested financial support to purchase chairs for their recital hall. And then the following council meeting, you heard from the Community Arts Council of Prince George and Region, together with Trinity United Church, that asked for $5,000 to support a feasibility study to examine the viability of establishing a mid-sized performing arts venue in the downtown. So those two delegations prompted a lot of council discussion about the alignment of their requests with the downtown art strategy that was still in draft form. So administration committed to bring that downtown art strategy in its draft form to council before the end of the year. It's appended to your report. And I am going to highlight a few sections of the downtown art strategy, but before I do that, I just wanted to make a couple of really important comments. The first was that the downtown art strategy was never intended, nor was it designed to be a community-wide arts and cultural master plan. It was very specifically focused on the downtown, and with council's approval, that focus was based on administration's recommendation to do that because we were seeing unprecedented investment in the downtown, both in the public and private sector, that the Community Arts Council was working hard with the city's support to establish a creative arts hub and look at the feasibility of that in the downtown. And also, we knew that because of all the land opportunities, that there was going to be a civic core planning process, and that it made good sense that a downtown art strategy would help inform that. The second really important point I want to make before touching on just a few highlights in the strategy is that it was presented during COVID. And as a result, we weren't able to do the necessary public engagement to test some of the really critical recommendations, particularly around space for the arts, space for performance. We weren't able to connect it to the downtown civic core planning project that was important. But also, it was done during a time when the context was different than it is now. And just as one note, you might see a recommendation in the report about the siting and function of some kind of a multi-use performance space. Well, a lot of that recommendation was based on its adjacency to the Civic Centre and the opportunity to expand the capacity of the Civic Centre to attract large conference events with some additional space that might be in a multifunctional facility. We don't know, because we're not out of COVID yet, whether or not that's a realistic recommendation, whether that's a realistic consideration. So with those two opening comments, I did want to skate very briefly over some of the content of the report. So you'll notice that it's split really into two categories. There was some administrative priorities at the time the downtown art strategy was initiated that it was intended to address. And one of those was the roles and responsibilities of both the regional district and the City of Prince George in relation to the operation of Exploration Place and the Two Rivers Art Gallery. There was also some administrative requests saying, help us identify how we should be investing in arts and culture, in things like public art. And also, how should we be structuring our service agreements and our grant agreements with the nonprofit organizations that provide so much of our arts and cultural service in the community? So those recommendations and those considerations were not lost as a result of COVID. And in the staff report before you, you'll see that I go on to talk about the fact that we're still talking with the regional district about Exploration Place and the Two Rivers Gallery. And at a very recent council meeting, you actually directed administration to review its public arts policy. Well, that work to review that public arts policy and to bring information back to council will be informed by some of the recommendations in the downtown arts strategy. Specifically, all of the benchmarking work that was done so that we could compare Prince George practices to emerging trends and certainly best practices in similar sized municipalities. The second part of the highlights that I want to talk about is really the ones that related more specifically to space requirements. So functional space requirements for arts and cultural organizations, and specifically functional space requirements for some kind of an 800-seat concert hall. So those recommendations are all detailed in the report. Radloff and Associates, the key consultant, had subcontracted with David Huco, who came up with lots of citing suggestions, summarized most of his recommendation by saying that one of the best risk-reducing strategies for the city would be to consider some kind of a multi-use facility that would accommodate some need for that 800-seat performance space, but that could also serve to accommodate the needs of arts and cultural organizations. So really looking at a multi-use type of facility, which seems to be very aligned with what we're seeing from organizations like the British Columbia Recreation and Parks Association that are saying this seems to be an emerging trend. But all this to say that these were draft recommendations. They haven't been tested publicly, and more importantly, they haven't been considered in our new reality and what will be our new reality post-COVID. And we haven't had the opportunity really to connect them with so much of the planning work that has to happen in our downtown core. So if I circle back to the two delegation requests to sort of close my comments here, very happy to hear that one of the delegations received the funding that it needed to provide the seats in the recital hall. So that was great news. Administration's recommendation on the second part, because the downtown arts strategy doesn't really speak in great detail to a smaller size performance venue, is to have the Community Arts Council and Trinity United come back to the city with the request once funding has been secured from the other funding sources that they identified during their presentation to you near the end of October. So I'll just close there. I know it's been a long evening for you, so I don't want to go into detail of the report, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bone. I have Councillor Ramsey, followed by Councillor Frizzell.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just going to mention, this report does mention the Two Rivers Gallery, and I sit on that board, but the discussion is not about that venue. It's really about the broad art strategy. So I don't believe I'm in a conflict of interest. However, if the conversation does get there, I will at that point declare a conflict. I read through the art strategy, and it, I think it was 106 pages. It was very interesting. I guess, Ms. Bone, my question would be, reading through the recommendations, it seems like the logical next step is to create or begin the preliminary work for that arts and culture master plan. Is that perhaps the direction that you believe we need to take as the next step for this?
As I mentioned during my comments, it was a very purposeful shift in focus that the city took. Way back in, I believe it was 2018, Council actually approved a budget enhancement for the city to engage in a community-wide arts and cultural master plan to help direct its investment in the arts. And then as a result of all the reasons I mentioned around investment, downtown development, opportunity, the focus was very narrow, and it was specifically about the downtown and the potential to use arts and culture to help enliven the downtown, to create, a downtown that would be welcoming. So I don't know that my recommendation to you at this juncture would be to put that work aside and to start to launch yet another study around a broader community arts and cultural plan. I think my suggestion is, if Council so chooses to proceed with some kind of civic core planning process, that the inputs related specifically to infrastructure in the downtown for arts and culture be considered as part of that. And I think there's so much material in the arts strategy that would help that, and that would align very nicely with public engagement processes that would probably happen as part of a civic core planning process, if that's in fact the direction that we choose to follow.
And would those engagement processes not occur in a arts and culture master plan as well?
They certainly could. Our initial work with the Community Arts Council to do some mapping, which was a very first step before we were going to launch a community-wide arts and cultural plan, actually showed that the bulk of arts organization, arts entities, even home sort of arts, were somehow located in the downtown. So it makes sense, once again, in my mind, having worked on this project for the last couple of years, to try to connect what we've learned through this strategy to a broader civic core planning process, see where that takes us before deciding whether or not we need to take a step back and look at a much larger arts and culture strategy citywide.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. And, you know, I think perhaps both need to occur. I think the question is just when. And you know, without having that culture, that arts and culture master plan in place, it just seems like perhaps we're putting the cart before the horse, but I think everyone is also reported out, and you know, we've done this work repeatedly. I think we know what we need as a community. You know, we've gone to workshops and conventions and webinars and presentations about, you know, how important the arts are to our community, to many communities. I think you see it in the demographics and the statistics, in the education breakdown, the family makeup of groups that are going to, you know, attending arts and culture events. And for me to see, you know, we have, I think there was a page that compared us to peer municipalities that have universities as well, that have strong university education, and you know, their uptake in arts and culture events is really high. And I think that perhaps, you know, we know from our economic development team that we have an issue with retaining graduates from our universities and colleges that are in our community, and perhaps that is the missing piece for me. So I am interested to see where the conversation goes. I know that I would like to see the civic core planning process move in the next calendar year, or however long that process takes. Perhaps you can comment on what that process looks like, what the next steps would be, and when the work would begin, if that was the direction of council to take.
What I can say is that it's probably not my place to describe the civic core planning process, but what I can say is stress the urgency, and not to put too fine a point on it, but what we learned through the downtown arts strategy is people want to have a conversation about infrastructure, space for arts organizations, space for performance. And knowing that there's a lot of other infrastructure demands in the downtown core, it would make sense that somehow the arts infrastructure needs are considered with other infrastructure needs, and is there an opportunity to align the needs, to marry the needs, to look at something related to that. But I would turn to my colleagues for comment on the broader civic core plan. And
certainly, Your Worship, thank you. So we hope to bring council a draft strategic plan in the near future for council's consideration, and depending on council's obviously consideration and approval of that plan, we anticipate Civic Core planning may be one of the priorities that Council wishes to focus on. So we would be able to provide more of a description of that process if Council identifies that as a priority in the next strategic plan, and it would incorporate, as Ms. Bone indicated, the downtown art strategy initiatives as well, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey, good. Thank you. Councillor Skaken, followed by Councillor McConaughey.
Thank you, Worship, and thanks to Ms. Bone. And this is what I wasn't looking forward to, is having this massive report on a huge agenda to start with. So, you know, I know we wanted this here by the end of the year, but we won't do this any justice if we deal with this really in any detail tonight. And page 3 of the report, the heading is noting on timing of this report. I mean, it basically says it all. Because of COVID, there hasn't been community a stakeholder consultation. There's a lot of work to do. The Community Arts Council is here. You know, there's a number of groups that have given feedback, and I'm sure want to give more feedback. So, well, I mean, I think, Your Worship, if you read that, and you know, I'm just trying to listen to Ms. Bone, and I'm going to ask administration, if we defer this, because I don't think we can really do anything tonight as far as moving forward until we get that consultation done. And Ms. Bone has identified that a lot of people want they're talking about the arts infrastructure downtown, I guess. So I'm just wondering to administration, if COVID, we don't know when this is going to end. And Mr. Babbage mentioned the council's strategic plan. Would deferring this to spring at some point give us an opportunity for a more meaningful consultation with the stakeholders that might be concerned with and want input to what's happened with the downtown infrastructure? What does that look like to administration? Because I don't want to just defer it and come back in 3 or 4 months, but just to administration, what would that look like? And would we need to make any motions for additional work, or would that be something that would just happen?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the recommendation before Council this evening is simply to receive this report for information. That's the only recommendation that staff is bringing forward at this time. As we indicated, if staff or if Council is able to identify some priorities in the strategic plan early in the new year, then our corporate work plan will flow from that, and we would be able to identify some specific goals and objectives and the timelines for that in the corporate work plan. So all administration is looking for this evening is just receipt of this report, but is happy to answer any questions that Council may have.
Great. So receipt, I mean, we can always come back to the report because it's obviously Mr. Radloff and his group did a lot of work. So I look forward to getting into some more detailed discussion after the strategic plan comes out, Your Worship. And I think Ms. Bone and her group have done an amazing job. And I just want to make sure that we get the feedback we need, because this goes back to the days when I was on council with Councillor Basserman. He talked about the arts corridor and a number of things. And, you know, we've this Performing Arts Center and a number of things, and we've kind of been spinning our wheels with different organizations. But I think, you know, looking at this plan, looking what administration wants to do, and the willingness of council, I think we have an opportunity to actually, you know, get something done. And so I appreciate it. I'll leave it at that, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skaken. Councillor McConaughey, followed by Councillor Kraus.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hall, and thank you to Ms. Bone. I believe, yeah, we have this report in front of us because we asked for a bit of a sneak peek on kind of what direction or what's in the hopper in response to the last couple of groups that we have had before us looking for support for their performance spaces. So I appreciate this, Ms. Bone. It was made clear to us that it's not ready and what some of the barriers have been to getting this further down the road. But I do appreciate this. I think we've got some, there's some exciting opportunities ahead that we haven't had in a couple generations. So this is with our downtown planning, our civic core planning, and I'm with Councillor Ramsey. We're reported out. So the last thing we want to do is kind of like the library entrance, Councillor Skaken, where, you know, 37 years of reports, and finally, ta-da, there's the entrance. So I really want to thank and recognize all the work that organizations have invested, such as the Community Arts Council, who represents dozens of our arts and culture orgs in our city. And it's great that they're part of this process, working forward, bringing that voice along with them. And yeah, as Councillor Skaken said, we're not spending a lot of time on what this report is right now, other than to acknowledge it. It's appreciated at this time. I do see what we can do moving forward with some of these smaller asks for smaller spaces, which is the whole point of this exercise at this time. And yeah, exciting times ahead when this comes back and council can play an active role in what this looks like, fleshing out to move forward. So with our arts and culture and what that looks like in our community. So that's all I got. Thanks, Ms. Bone.
Thank you. Councillor Kraus.
Well, thank you, Worship. Great report. And I certainly appreciate there hasn't been the time or the opportunity to do the community consultation that you would have liked to do. I guess like others, I want to move into action. We have been talking about a facility in the downtown core for a very long time. And I know that Vanier Hall used to be the go-to for a larger facility, but that's complicated at this juncture. So I think the reality is we have to find a facility that we own, that we manage, and that the community really has access to. So I'm looking forward to some action on this. We probably won't get to all of that tonight, and that's okay. Right now is to receive the report, acknowledge it, and appreciate that you got it to us on time, and look forward to the consultation. And so I look forward to moving into the Civic core planning process so we can really decide where that might be located. And I would like to see it in the core with other civic facilities. So I really look forward to seeing what that process would look like, and if that can come back to us earlier in the new year, that'd be wonderful. So, and like has been said, you know, I've been here a long time, and we've been talking about a major facility for the arts all of that time. So I think it's, if we could just get moving, I'd be really happy. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Sampson, followed by Frizzell.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks, Councillor Kraus. Absolutely, 100% agreed. I want action on this as well. And my concern going out of this is we approved this for receipt, and then we, okay, and then we wait, and then so my concern is how do we trigger this next step? How do we actually, maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but what is the trigger that council needs to pull, or what do we do here to make this next step happen? I don't want this to just go away.
So, Your Worship, as I indicated, if Council approves the strategic plan, which incorporates the Civic core planning process in it, that would be a signal to administration to get moving on it, to take action on it, and we would be able to identify specific goals and objectives related to that process and the timelines for that, and Council would be able to receive updates from administration a few times a year on progress on that, Your Worship.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much. And timeline on something like that. If we're approving the strategic plan, I think it's early January. What do we see for this type of work to start coming back to council to look at? I want to set I guess what I'm trying to get at is I want to set some good groundwork for the next council to get rolling on it, rather than them trying to get their feet under them and then get going on nothing at the start and then trying to piece it together from the beginning.
Sure. Administration would have to do some work on that and think about what's attainable within the next year, and bring that to council for your information and approval, Your Worship.
Great. Thanks very much. I did not read all 500 pages of the report, but I did read quite a bit and skimmed quite a bit. And there's some glaringly obvious things that we are lacking in our community. And I think there will be more identified as we go to further community consultation. And I appreciate, Ms. Bone, you addressing the fact that we didn't have that opportunity yet, and that you and your group would like to do some more community consultation. And I don't want to, I mean, as Councillor Kroos mentioned, this has been talked about at council for a very, very long time, much beyond my years here, and I appreciate that I get to be part of this conversation, but I don't want to consult the crap out of it. I want to get going on things, so I want to find a nice, good way of bringing in the proper stakeholders and then moving it forward with some action, as has been said. So looking forward to that, and I guess we can talk more about this in January when the strategic plan comes forward. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Frizzell.
Thank you, Mayor Hall, and I echo the sentiments that my colleagues have been saying around the table already. Thanks to Executive Director Sean Farrell from Community Arts Council for sticking it out through the whole night tonight, and others who are here as well. It's not just the vision and the heart of this community that endures. It's also the economic benefit from it. Back September 30th, 2011. We were sitting in UBCM and James Moore said, there is no better bang for the buck than investing in arts and culture. It's not just about what it brings to the soul of the community, it's also good for business. And I agree, we got to get on this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Frizzell. I've got nobody else in the queue. I'll take it one step further, and I even have a location I'd love to see it built on. There we go. So we have a recommendation on the floor. We got a mover and seconder. Thank you.
So move.
Second. Who moved it? Councillor Everett?
Yes.
Councillor Sampson? All those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? In the room, opposed on Zoom? That's carried.